Hey, Polly, how's it going?
Hey, Chris, good to see you.
Yeah, I see you've taken over George's office. You taking over his whole job, or what's
Yeah,
going
that's
on?
right. He's left it all to me.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I love Pastor George, but I mean, I feel great about you taking over his position right now.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, I'm excited. Today we're talking about money, right?
That's right. Everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm hyped to see what our students and young adults have to say. Should we invite them in?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So we have a few new faces, and there's a couple people that are missing today, and that's all right. First off, Pastor George isn't speaking every week, and so we get to hear from Polly. So Polly's going to be sitting in with us today to talk about money. Very excited to hear from Polly. And then Nishadi wasn't able to be with us today, and so we invited in, pinch hitting, a substitute, who will be joining us from here on out also, Ian Hartford. Hey, Ian.
Yeah, I'm at home in Los Angeles. Right at the moment, I'm in my car. I just finished playing a round of golf. So that's what I've been mostly doing in 100-degree heat. So, yeah, it's fun. I go to Seattle University, where Miko went. So, yeah, I'm a junior. I just finished up junior year. And fun fact about me, I'm a first-generation American. So, yeah, that's my usual fun fact.
Well, thank you all for being here. Polly, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share some of your hopes in talking about money today, and then I'll kind of lead us through some questions that you got.
Sure. Well, thanks everyone for letting me join today. I've gotten to watch some of your conversations with George, and that was great. The sermon I'm going to be preaching on is going to be about money and finances. And I know for me, when I was a young adult, or like when I was graduating from college, a lot of my biggest questions were really around money and how I was going to manage it, how I was going to make it. I had a lot of fears around it. And so I imagine that might be the same today, particularly in this financial climate with a recession and unemployment. I imagine your fears are even higher, but I don't want to assume anything. I really want to hear from you and hear what you're thinking about around money and finances. And that will help me shape the sermon that I'm working on.
I'm curious, what has finances and interacting with money looked like for each of you in the context of your family and the culture you grew up in?
So both my parents grew up in the Philippines, and they have really, really big families. They came from broken homes, and so they just didn't have the best childhoods growing up. And so they ended up investing a lot in their education. They came to America. They wanted to make a better life for themselves and their families. And so they worked really hard, became doctors, and owned their own businesses and all these things, and made a lot of money. And so the message I always grew up with was happiness comes from wealth. And you got to make as much of it as possible. And you got to be very frugal. Both my parents are very, very frugal. You wouldn't be able to tell that they're wealthy. And you got to give, but don't give too much. Just give to the point where people don't think you're
dipstick.
Great question. So my parents both grew up in the hood, very different hood. So my dad was born and raised in East LA. And my mom was born and raised in San Bernardino, California, which is, the white hood. And so they worked very hard, like Miko's parents did, and they went to school up in Northern California. And they were some of the only handfuls of kids from their neighborhoods that got out. And so that being said, the values that came with money was work very, very hard, have integrity in your finances, and be very smart. My parents never bought new cars. They always bought used cars. We never went on really crazy trips, but they were really, really kind of imparted on me the importance of education. Like, don't spend money on new clothes, spend money on college. Don't spend money on $500 sneakers, buy textbooks, kinds of things. But what was interesting is my parents grew up with this deficit-minded perspective with money. There was never enough of it. And then when they both worked hard and became professionals, suddenly I grew up and I could go get shoes wherever I wanted to, right? That's how I talk about it. Like, whenever I needed new cleats, like that, there was never a conversation about that. It was like, oh, let's just go get her some cleats. And so for me, I never grew up having to prioritize something over something else. There was always enough to go around. And so when I came to college, it was a really big awakening because that's not how life goes for the majority of people. And I was shocked to find out that I am one of maybe 3 of my friends that are going to be debt-free after college. So for me, that was kind of the narrative growing up. And there's more to that I'll jump into in a little bit, but that's a little bit of a summary.
I have been very blessed to have parents that like value like saving a lot, and they were very adamant, like just like Sonia, like me not wanting me to graduate with any debt. And they like always say that it's not good to owe anybody, it's not good to owe anybody, and that's like been a mentality that's been drilled into me a lot, even though we don't struggle financially, and I'm very blessed for that. Like I've always been taught to kind of be cheap because I grew up in Singapore, and like the culture is kind of like everyone's kind of cheap there. And so like they want to get the best deal all the time. Like that's kind of something that I've also adopted. And so I also think that can lead to like a little bit of a stingy mindset sometimes, like not only in myself, but also in the culture that I'm in. And so it's also been interesting, like coming into college and seeing people who have different backgrounds, and like with different financial means, and like how they choose to use their money, you know, because I feel like I have friends on like all ends of the spectrum. There are people who I know like pretty rich people that can just spend whatever they want, and then I have people who really have to pay attention to that kind of thing. And like it's pretty eye-opening because like it's not something that I really thought about a lot growing up. Because I just got an allowance like every week, and I was in charge of like the small little things like buying my lunch for school, you know, like in the cafeteria kind of thing. And so it's definitely been a transition to college, seeing how different people manage it, and like not assuming that everyone has the same means as I have. And yeah.
So both my parents, they didn't grow up with much in Ireland. My mom didn't even go to college because they couldn't afford it. And then my dad went to boarding school when he was 11. And the only reason I'm kind of standing here today, or I guess sitting, that is, with my brother and, you know, my mom and that, is because of him and because of the sacrifices they made. But I'm kind of at a split in my family. My mom is very wise with her decisions. She's very business oriented. My dad could just go and spend whatever. And so I'm a lot like my mom. And I've kind of realized that with her family as well. Both of her sisters were not and are not the best with money. They, you know, accumulated credit card debt, spent money on, you know, toys for their kids, trips when they should have been paying for, you know, mortgages and things like that. So using money differently. And so my mom has taught my brother and I to be very smart that way, and to not just free willingly spend money, and to also give back what we've been blessed with, and to make a difference that way. And yeah, I mean, I'm blessed to live in the situation that I am in, for the hard work that has been sacrificed that came before me by my parents. So yeah.
It sounds like you all have obviously unique experiences because of where your own familial buildup, but also have a space where you have parents that have taught you a lot about the ways that they interact with money and what like frugality can look like and how to manage your money well. I am curious for each of you, how has your relationship with money changed as you've grown in your relationship with Jesus? Do you see that coming at odds with things that you grew up with from your family, or do you see those things aligning? What does that look like for each of you? And Polly, feel free to chime in if you have thoughts as well.
For me, I think the biggest thing that I was taught growing up was to be generous with what you have. And that has definitely been confirmed in college with my relationship with Jesus. And I think it was Joyce, who works at the Inn, part of UPC. She gave a talk on financialness. And I think she said something along the lines of the habits you build now when you have less will dictate how you live when you have more. And I think for me, that's been really huge in college because, I'm a young life leader and I spend time with other college students and things like that. And to be generous with the small pennies I have now will form habits that will indicate how I live later. And I think that's what Jesus is calling us to do, is to be generous with our time, with our resources, with our spaces, and with our finances and things like that. And so that's been really fun in college. And I think the cool thing about financial, like tithing or giving or things like that is myself and my community, I think we all kind of do it a little bit differently, right? Some people like pass the plate and put money in. Some people take like those students are mentoring out for lunch. Some people do mission trip work, things like that. And so I found it really cool to see how people are kind of taking the things that Jesus is calling them into and then being generous in that space particularly.
Yes, and yeah, I would just echo that. I think, as I came to get my own views about money, I think a lot of it was shaped by the idea of like that we're stewards, right, of what God has given us. And it's not just money, but I think it helped me rethink of not money as this separate thing, but as all of these pieces of our life, right, that need to come under Jesus' authority. They just made me think about that. And I think because often it's sort of a separate thing, right? Like money is separate from our walk with Jesus, but all of those things are interconnected.
Yeah, definitely. Like just to go off of that, like I think money is one of the hardest things to give to God. Your finances, just say, hey, God, like I trust you. You know my needs. This is my rent. My phone bill is this much. But the rest of it, I'm going to let you kind of take control. And I think we as college students get really nervous about that because that's kind of, we're not equipped yet to have, we don't have all the skills to make a lot of money and or know how to steward it well. And so we're learning. So thanks, Polly.
I think that this is one of the biggest things I struggle with actually, because like I said, like the way I grew up, I was almost like taught to have a cynical mindset that, there are people out there that can take advantage of you and like if you don't be careful, you're gonna like lose out on opportunities. You're not gonna, and like that kind of has developed like a subconscious thing within my mind where I'm like, okay, I need to like save, like I need to not give so much. And it's something I've been really trying to like combat, because like the idea of giving sacrificially is just something that I don't know. It's like I have to get out of my comfort zone, get out of my own idea of security, right? And really trust that God's security is above all. And it's difficult, really. And so I'm definitely still navigating how this goes. And so I think that's also something that I've only started doing as I've come to know Jesus. And like some of I am a pretty new believer. And so it's something that I've had to like really dig deep and like try to determine like what's the heart behind why I'm doing things, I also don't want to be in the situation where I'm like giving but to get something out of it, right? Like the whole idea of like giving without expectation of something in return. I don't want to have to give in order to like bolster my own reputation or like feel like I did something good. It should be just for God, right? It should just be like just pure, I want to give to people. And so trying to reconcile like the purity of my heart and making these kinds of decisions is also a difficult thing that I struggle with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jesus has definitely changed the way I view money and the way I handle money. For starters, he's made me a much more giving person with my finances. He's also made me a lot less attached to my finances. It wasn't uncommon like my freshman year. It's like, oh, I look at this or that, and like my happiness is kind of dependent on, what's in the bank or what's in the stock market, something like that. And I'd say the biggest way he's been able to change my relationship with finances has been through making me more grateful with what I have, as opposed to like always just being discontent with what I don't have.
As y'all think about life after college, I mean, it's this series, Life After College, is weird. What are some fears that maybe you have about money and finances? And maybe if you could add into that, like, what do you think about stewardship? Like we just talked about. You talked about the ways Jesus has changed some of your relationship with money. What do you think about how that will look like after college?
Okay. So I went through a very interesting experiment this past year. And so in my mind, I just imagine myself, in the future going, I want to be like an entrepreneur and take all these big risks and things like that. But, if you look at the stats, most of the first-time entrepreneurs do really, really poorly, and like they don't make any money, even if they are able to get it afloat. And so I was like, oh shoot, like how do I prepare for like the worst of the worst? And so I challenged myself to sleep on the floor for a few months. And it was, oh my gosh, it was such a great practice. And then afterwards, I was like, dang, I think I could handle it. It's like if things don't work out, like I'm prepared to like not make any money and just live on the streets. And so in that sense, I'd say I don't really fear, like I don't have any financial fears like after college for myself. The fears more so come from me not being able, like if I get like a girlfriend or a wife one day, like my fear comes from like me not being able to like support her or like a family and things like that. But as a single man, no, I like I don't have any financial fears, and I'm just gonna get after it, which is awesome.
It's true. Miko slept on the floor for a long time, and I remember the first time I went to his house and he was showing me his bedroom and there was no bed.
Great, man. Good times. You had a blank look on your face. You're like, I don't know what to say.
So I think something that's very unique, and I spoke about this earlier, is that I graduated college and I don't have any debt. I have a completely clean slate. And I think, just for the sake of speaking about the kind of conversations I have with my friends and people in our community, is I'm starting 5-6 years ahead of a lot of my peers who have thousands of dollars of debt. And so I'd say a big fear for college students, I don't know if they're represented in this group here, is I will never get out from under debt. Like that will haunt me and it will go with me. And actually, it's funny. It's actually one of the only forms of debt you can have that's only yours. Even when you get married, your debt does not transfer to your spouse. It's still just yours. Only student debt is the one that does that. If you buy a home, it's like together. And if you buy a car, it's together. But student loans, that's yours forever. Weird thing about our society in that way. So that's a big fear that I think is present in our community at large. But for me personally, I'd say the biggest fear I have is to be so nervous about money that I don't actually get to enjoy what I spend, and to actually enjoy a meal and actually enjoy like buying a new pair of pants or going on a trip, right? And just being so like, oh, I shouldn't have done this trip. Like I could have done something else with it. And then I never actually get to enjoy the money I worked for. So I'm fearful of that I'll just be so like frugal that like I won't actually get to experience the fruit of my labor. So hopefully we don't get into that trap. So far it's been okay. I enjoy buying a new pair of pants, but we'll see. Hopefully we don't swing the other way and hate it. So
I think the biggest thing for me is probably not being wise in big decisions, whether that's for housing, for job contracts, just kind of the important things that really matter, making the best out of them, and not kind of missing an opportunity or letting something go to waste necessarily. I don't see myself spending on trips when I should be paying for bills, but being smart in kind of the long run with things as well. And I think also to not be so protective of it, because I don't spend on anything except for like food usually, and so I think also giving where it need be as well in my life. So yeah.
My biggest fear going forward is being able to be financially independent, because my parents like pretty much expect me to be that after I graduate, and I believe there will be some grace because of this crazy job market and like just everything that's going on. But like, I don't know, I'm a little concerned about getting a job or being able to support myself, especially because I don't know, I feel like money really gives you freedom to do things, and it gives you a peace of mind. And I guess I just have like images of me just like traveling or like doing things like this that I don't necessarily know are like feasible, you know. But so I want to be able to reach a point where like that balance can be made, and like I guess there's a lot of anxieties surrounding that. Also, I feel like I'm prone to kind of like looking at what other people are doing, and like everyone is doing like a different thing, and like it makes me feel like I really have to figure out my own path forward, and that can be scary as well. And so just trusting in God through this is pretty difficult, like the more that I just do that. And so I feel like I'm really trying to get it out of my head, and just like put my head down and like work hard and just see where I end up, kind of thing.
We need to wrap up soon, but Polly, I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or like an ending question or statement for our panelists and our students. Like, what are you thinking, Polly?
Sure. Well, thank you all for sharing and answering all these questions. It's really helpful for me to hear from you. But, it's interesting as I look back to when I was graduating and when I was a young professional, I think one of the biggest concepts that kind of caught me in my walk with Jesus was this idea of downward mobility versus upward mobility. And I think I'd always been taught, like, try to get the best for yourself, get better, right? Get the best deals, get the best job. That's how you'll be secure. But realizing that, like, actually, that's not where our security or even our joy actually comes from, right? And, obviously, like Tori was saying, money is something that does help us be able to do more things. And there are a lot of benefits from it, but not making that the center. And, I think the concept of downward mobility is really biblical, right? Because like the God of the universe came down in the form of Jesus, right? He left all power, all privilege, right, to come and be one with us. And I think that was the question that I really had at that time, is like, what does it look like to actually be willing to give up things, even financially, in order to be following Jesus into the places where he's moving? And so I'd encourage that for a question for all of us to be thinking about, because I think as we leave behind some of the things that we think will give us security, that's actually where we encounter Jesus at work and really see him provide, see him do miracles. And of course, that looks different for all of us. There's nothing wrong with money in itself, but I think chasing wealth or chasing a good job because it pays well for security is never going to give us life that really is life, right? So I'm still trying to figure this out. And I think it's always a back and forth of, am I pursuing money too heavily and safety and security and being really practical to a degree that it's unhealthy? Or am I being kind of reckless and saying like, oh, God will provide? And I think we often have one tendency or another, but we also can kind of move back and forward through those things in life. So I just think it's a constant check. It doesn't really get easier as you get older, but we always have to ask ourselves, like Sonia, like you were saying with Joyce giving that talk, the patterns we have now are the patterns will continue. So anyway, thank you so much for engaging with this.